Okay, so the world and his wife, or however I put it, AI front and center. Everyone's talking about it, um, but I guess there's potentially a bit of disappointment in that a lot of the projects aren't delivering as expected. Yeah, limited success and sort of just lack of impact for the enterprise. Is that a fair sort of summary of the situation, or yeah, how do you see the AI promise versus the reality, I guess, for you?
Mhm. Yeah. The way that I kind of look at it, and I kind of, glance back at, the dot-com boom, and all the changes that kind of happened and how quickly things came in. I would say where we are in AI, it's very early days. We still have a lot of efficiencies to gain. We still have a lot of things to figure out. There's really no AI experts out there or people that, know everything about it because things are changing so quickly. Everything from hardware consuming more power, data center designs are much different. The facilities where the data centers are being placed is completely different. So there's a lot of changes and a lot of disruption that's happening in the industry, pretty much leading to where we are now.
Yeah, and I guess just to emphasize the point, I think seeing something from Gartner, I think they predict that about a third of all Gen AI projects are going to be abandoned sort of after proof of concept. I mean, that's quite I don't know what the standard project attrition rate is, just for general enterprise, but that sounds to me quite a high wastage rate or whatever. Does that surprise you how high that number is for projects that will be abandoned?
No, I mean, I think the amount of projects is going to be an astronomical number. I mean, we're going to have for apps, we're going to have, millions potentially of different apps that are coming out that leverage AI and just different tools within. So I think, yeah, there's going to be a large number, and then obviously a large number of that is going to kind of fizzle out or fade away. The efficient ones, the ones that are have legitimate projects are going to actually sustain. But it's it's going to be definitely a big shakeout, I think.
Yeah, and just before we move on a little bit, agentic AI seems to have arrived on the scene as well. Is that likely to what how does that change AI at all, or does it just add to the complexity and therefore the potential problems as well?
Yeah, so they're all kind of based the way, coming from the hardware space, the actual system itself, are their GPU or accelerator based. So pretty much the way that the application's written and some of those other parts, I think, are going to change. Then there's going to be different use cases that leverage certain models more efficiently, smaller sets of hardware, edge types of deployments. But looking at it with my lens from a hardware perspective, you're going to gain efficiencies over time. Chips are going to get more efficient, and they're going to be designed slightly different to accommodate more efficient cooling and other components. But the actual applications are going to change dramatically. We're going to see tons of applications changing in. MCP is another big one. Some of these automations are going to get tied to AI, and you're actually going to have functional agents. There's going to be a lot of iterations of the actual application side, but on the back side of it, it's all going to fall back into those problems that we mentioned before. Just different water waste. The cooling capacity in a data center. All that is, regardless, it's going to amplify all of those problems anyway, and going to change some of the delivery on that.
Okay, and in terms of some of the potential reasons why the projects aren't delivering or people are certainly sort of disappointed them, I'm thinking things like, I mean, is costs one? Do people just get their sums wrong, so they sort of think it's not going to be that expensive, and then by the time the project's sort of halfway through, they've spent rather more money than they pay? I mean, is that one of the issues?
I bet it comes down to like over leveraging. So as far as getting a loan, getting money injected into the space, it's a race. So everybody's trying to do it, but not knowing and not having a book to read on exactly how to implement, how to deploy, and then coming up with all these challenges in just the overall cost to overcome some of these challenges is really new territory for people. So I think that's really where it's getting. Some people are going to be more efficient than others, but you're going to have exactly that shakeout from all of the problem, because it's a large problem. It's not a small one. A data center in a let's say it's an AI deployment, 1,000 cabinet deployment. Something like that is going to cost a fortune just to build a data center to sustain 1,000 cabinets with these AI builds than a traditional data center with 1,000 cabinets at 3 kilowatts per rack. You're talking 10 times that. You're talking 30, 50, even 100 kilowatts per rack, depending on the type of design that they have. So it could be a significant impact.
Yeah, and I guess related to the potential sort of, I won't say out of control, but unexpected cost, high level of cost, is the fact that there's maybe not sufficient understanding of all that necessary infrastructure, whether it's upgrades or even, as you say, building a greenfield site. If you're lucky, I suppose, lucky enough to have a blank piece of paper, but
Mm.
yeah, people just don't understand what's required to support the AI. Is that fair to say?
Yep, that's true. I would say that the servers are growing faster than the data center can sustain. When a traditional data center would take 2 years to get up and implemented, so that would be like a co-location building out a prefabricated data center, basically a brick, one level type of data center. It would be about 2 years from start to finish in the greenfield. With an AI, if you were to build an AI data center, it's changing so rapidly that 2 years is way too long. The technology that you're going to need to be building for in 2 years is going to be much different than what it is today. So a lot of the data centers, a lot of the facilities are implementing liquid cooling, which is basically the new it's an application that you're going to put inside of servers. Immersion, it could be direct to chip, rear door cooling, any of those different technologies. Now they have to be right down to either the cage level or to the rack level, depending on the implementation. A lot of the governance and a lot of the requirements aren't being fully communicated to the data center builders, or they haven't in the last 2 years. So it gets really complicated and really expensive to fit that in later along down the line.
And I'm also wondering, I mean, I think it's fair to say that in terms of data center history, this is quite a sort of significant period of disruption, upheaval, whatever. So is it also the case that maybe organizations don't fully explain to the staff, the employees, what's going on? This sort of, I guess, come under the heading of change management. I mean, how important is it to make sure that everyone understands, what's going on, why, and how they are going to be involved? I guess it's sort of people, processes, products type of thing. But is that something, do you think, is lacking at the moment? People are, everyone's heading to AI, but no one's really explained to a lot of the folks in their organization sort of why, how, and how it might impact them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think I think there needs to be guardrails set up. I think so. If you look at just taking intellectual property, if you're working on a project and you hop over to Chat GPT and ask it to solve a problem, paste in all your code, which would be intellectual property for the company. Setting up guardrails is very important. It's very key, where you could do something like that if you needed to, let's say, rewrite it to a new version or a new language, and do it really quickly. The tool is fantastic at doing things like that. But as far as setting it up, a corporation to actually set up those guardrails, set up a facility for people to do those types of deployments where the IP is protected, that information is just going to go out to to a public cloud somewhere. Having internal piece, or having just basically teaching people how to use it, when to use it, and then just approving it the right way. It does change pretty quickly. So as far as new updates, new applications now having AI functionality, the company has to stay on top of all these things, because that could happen not only with Chat GPT, but with any other application that has a built-in feature. You have to be aware, make sure that the employees are aware of what it is that they're doing. But yeah, that's definitely a big concern nowadays.
And also, I'm thinking, I believe I saw something either today or yesterday. The EU is certainly sort of legislating around AI. I mean, there is a lot of regulation either in existence or being talked about. Are people sort of worried or just uncertain about, AI regulation? And you mentioned obviously there the sort of intellectual property, but I mean, there's the sort of ethics of it, the bias. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of stuff to take on board. Is that something that people are struggling to get to grips with?
Mhm. Yeah, it comes down to, yeah, you have ethics concerns, you have bias sometimes when you're asking it a question. I actually reference sometimes, leveraging these AI, you can get a very confident incorrect answer. So if you don't know enough about the topic, you could get very skewed in the wrong direction if you're asking for specific research. In 6 months ago, it was a much different answer than it is today. Now you can get a lot of references for a lot of the models. You can get a lot of things that can help do checks and balances. But again, it's more of an education piece for the user to actually have a tool, instead of just allowing whatever comes in and copy and pasting into either your documentation, to your work. That could pose great challenges in actually all the data now. So where, if let's say you're creating a KB article, or you're creating some reference material and you're using completely incorrect reference data that went into it, and then now you're going to publish it, and it's just going to be more bad data that gets stored, and that could be used again in another project. So you definitely have to pay attention to how it is, where the data is coming from. Is the data clean? Is the data relevant for the topic that you're using? And then training these models with that in mind is going to make it a very useful tool than a very harmful tool.
And also, just flicking back to costs. I mean, I guess most of them, hopefully, folks understand, what's involved. But I mean, are there sort of hidden costs, unexpected costs that as the project develops, they didn't realize, whether, whatever it is they're spending. So, yeah. How I mean, I guess it's difficult to manage if they're sort of hidden, but what are the things that people maybe haven't budgeted for or allowed for when it comes to a project?
Yeah, one thing, with Park Place being a global provider in liquid cooling, I definitely see a lot of this on the actual data center cooling side. Traditionally, we focused more in on the server itself, the racks, the cabinets, never on the facility. So what's interesting that we see for some of these hidden costs, more in the brownfield, existing data center. IT gets budget now for let's say that they don't want to do a cloud version or the cloud service. They want to actually self-host because of data governance or whatever the case is. So they stand up a large deployment of an AI cluster. Let's say it's multiple systems, a few hundred different servers, all GPU based. Those systems produce so much heat in that traditional data center. So they either have to upgrade the air conditioning, or they have to do some type of liquid cooling to it. So we get introduced to some of these problems as they're in the POC phase. So they're not even to a production run yet, and they're seeing hidden costs just pop through, and it's basically creating hotspots in the data center that's creating other problems within the facility. So now either the air conditioner needs a major overhaul, or they have to bring water in where water wasn't previously designed to be brought into. The servers themselves might not have capability for liquid cooling, so it would have to be retrofitted. A lot of people are hydrophobic, so you actually don't want to bring water into the cabinet, never mind, within millimeters of a CPU. Those kinds of things. The training element. So now people have to understand how to maintain this equipment. Now it's in a cluster, InfiniBand switches. You have potentially thousands of cables in the back of one rack, and then you have other liquid cables that are running inside of there. There's a lot of challenges that come up just in those, just in bringing one or two racks in, never mind a full scale deployment. So a lot of these people are seeing these problems, or pretty significant problems. We actually did a research project on the cost of a data center build in New York City, and it was about 25 million to build out a data center previously in an air cooled environment or in an air cooled type of deployment. With a liquid cooled deployment, you're talking about 13 million. So it's actually significantly cheaper to build it in advance. But what we're seeing is a lot of those air cooled facilities are already built and they're already spec'd out for the next 2 years, that now they have to retrofit. And then that's all the hidden costs that they weren't originally forecasting on top of what they've already spent.
Okay, and maybe there's one other aspect to consider. You've got the AI infrastructure, and then clearly the data center industry is heading on, as most of us industry-wise are, sustainability. The part of sustainability, net zero, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess on the face of it, sort of AI infrastructure and all the power it requires, water, etc., doesn't sound desperately sustainable, but clearly there are ways of ensuring that it is as sustainable as it can be. Just your thoughts, I suppose, as to how those, building out AI infrastructure and also trying to be sustainable, how possible is it to serve both those equally well, if you like?
It is definitely a challenge. It's a quite a difficult balance. You have where some AI deployments are most effective with a low latency. So you basically want your, let's say it's an edge deployment that's close to a facility, close to a data center. If you're running a large model, it's going to be a pretty power consuming or very heavy deployment, that, or very power hungry, I should say. And then equal to power, it's going to be very thirsty. It's going to be a very wasteful water facility. It might be better to deploy a micro deployment or a micro AI application at that facility, at that edge location where it consumes less power and where you need that low latency. And then maybe structuring data centers in colder climates where you have a lot more free air cooling, you have a lot more efficient mechanisms for cooling, because cooling essentially is one of the more costly items inside of a data center build. It's in some cases 40% of the cost that goes into a data center goes directly into cooling. So that efficiency number translates right into sustainability. The amount of water that gets wasted every query that goes through, if it's in a traditional, or we call them in the United States, the football cities, if you have a data center that's already in a heavy populated area that has very expensive power, that water gets pumped into, expanding that data center really, it becomes very difficult and not sustainable. So maybe repositioning those data centers to locations where power is more abundant, water is more abundant, and then you have the ability to cool it with very sustainable measures. That's a very good way of looking at it. And then obviously throwing away existing platforms, taking systems and upgrading, not throwing away the existing systems and actually recycling them properly. And then that also cuts down on some of these builds where, or at least the way, because we're in a race for AI, a lot of the sustainability is almost a secondary topic. It's more about rack capacity and getting the actual application up and running. Where Europe, Germany, there's some regulations and governance around laws put in to get more sustainable infrastructure by 2030, 2050, and so on.
So, in terms of what we've discussed, I guess, if folks are able to sort of understand and address many of the things we've talked about, they get a better chance for these AI. So was it 33%? Hopefully that figure could get reduced in terms of AI project success. And I mean, in terms of the benefits, clearly, if you don't do it, you potentially go, I suppose the drastic one is you go out of business because your competitors are. But
Mhm.
what else are people going to find when it comes to a successful AI project? Clearly, the AI is important, but what else will be good for them? Whether it's, I don't know, budgets, etc. Just any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, one way that I kind of look at this is I always, look to the past in a similar type of deployment. Like what were we doing before we had Google search? Did we have, could you imagine today being without some type of Google search or a large search engine that searches the entire internet? You'd have to be much more focused on what you wanted. You didn't have crawlers collecting the most recent information. The same thing I believe is translating into AI, in not just generative, but all the other applications. If agents get more efficient and basically translate to more, it's going to make a much better employee. It's going to make much more efficient use of our time. So we're not going to focus as much on certain types of research. And then another example is um, I forget the name of it now, but the spell check on Microsoft Word, another utility that it's just built in and we're just automatically using it. We don't have to worry about spelling a word; it can correct itself, um, or but we know how to check it. We know how to use it. We don't just submit a document without proofreading it, and things like that. And the same thing is going to go is with AI. If you use it as a tool, use it to help benefit, to become more effective at your role, and then possibly reducing some of the mundane tasks or let the computer kind of handle those components. I think you're right. If you're not using it, you're going to probably fade. You're going to fade out in the wind. And if you are using it, you better do a really good job to make sure data isn't leaked, to make sure it's used efficiently, and to make sure everyone's using it properly. It'll just be more effective long term.
I suppose then the final question would be, are there some key things that people need to, I mean, when you see successful AI projects, are there some, you know, shared objectives, implementations, etc., that give those, a hallmark of those ones? So I suppose to put it another way, what are the essential components of a sort of hopefully successful AI, giving yourselves the best chance of success for an AI project? What needs to be in there?
Yeah, I would say definitely have key stakeholders from throughout the business. So in on the facility side for actually housing the equipment and making sure that the facility can handle a specific project. So that's basically IT folks, facility people who aren't used to working with each other in lockstep now have to, is a very key element to not only keep costs down, but to make sure it's efficiently run. And then outside of that, more on the business user side, the business users need to understand not only the certain applications that have AI built in, but also having if there's a specific coding element, if you have developers or different teams that are actually leveraging these technologies in their application or creating tools for the business users, make sure that they're all in sync and they're working together, because it's growing fast and there's usually teams working independently on the same project, and that is obviously highly ineffective when you have two people trying to achieve the same thing, just not understanding that the other team is working on it as well. Those are kind of some key elements to make sure that the project runs smoothly. But the business user needs to be in lockstep again with the application developers, because it's changing so quickly and there's enhancements that are coming in so fast that they need to be aware of while it's in kind of an agile type of rollout or agile type of deployment.
And just, I mean, just on the technology side, I mean, is it impossible to sort of stand up an AI infrastructure without liquid cooling? And so is liquid cooling pretty much table stakes for AI? And are there any other sort of infrastructure upgrades or changes that people will pretty much have to implement in order
We're
to
at
cater
Yeah,
for
we're
AI?
at the cusp right now. So I would say we're at the cusp because the power, the TDP per CPU per GPU is basically still capable of air cooling, but all the newer models are just starting to come out with liquid cooling as table stakes. So the efficiency factor increases when you liquid cool it. So not only is that a smarter choice because you can get it's more going to be more sustainable using less power, but also you could get more performance out of it, which means less systems, which means less power, less water waste, etc. But we're at the cusp. I believe the next version of CPU, the next version of GPU that comes out is going to be required of liquid cooling in some form or fashion. The high velocity fans are basically at their at the high mark. They can't cool fast enough, or they can't cool enough at the TDP design of each of the components today.
Okay, well, I mean, it's been great to chat, and thanks so much for sharing so many great insights into what, as I say, everyone's talking about it, but maybe doesn't as yet understand fully how to, go about it. So it's been great for you to share so much information. So, Chris, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip. Appreciate it.